all for making it 10 a.m. I know it's a 6 a.m. start equivalent for the art world. So thank you for showing up. The good news is, in the very near future, this will be all online, so you won't need to hear me talk about it. It'll be at your discretion and your time and your leisure, and from the comfort of your living room, you'll be able to explore the world of Iranian modern and contemporary art. So just a little background. About 2 years ago, during the middle of the pandemic, we were all experiencing, lockdowns, different ways to experience art. And my thought was, this is great as an interim, but it never substitutes the real experience of visualizing art. And so, with that, we started thinking about how would you be able to improve the experience, or make it maybe even rival the physical experience. And so we came up with an initiative to create a virtual museum that would be approaching art in a different way. So this presentation is really more to show you some of the creations we put together, to acknowledge the team effort. We have some members of the initial team and people who have been helping throughout this whole process. So I'll be grateful to them and thank them along the way. And so this presentation will show you many different iterations of how this museum worked, some of the results, and I'll be talking through some of the slides, but some of them I'll just invite you to just watch the imagery and absorb yourself into the works. So let's start this. Given that I've made my life the last 20 years in the UAE, I thought, why not start this journey in the UAE? And with that, we created a concept to have a virtual existence, but a museum that had no plumbing, no gravity, no restrictions, and display these works that are primarily from the collection, but the idea is that over time, we would invite other collections, bring other people into the project, really act as a bridge between Iran and the rest of the world, and the rest of the world to Iran. And of course, there was also a mandate. When you talk about virtual, people assume virtual headsets. And whilst that experience is great in some instances, it's not accessible. How many people have headsets in their homes and are able to browse things in such a way? So we made it the opposite mandate. We wanted to really democratize access to this. So this is non-profit, fully free. It's meant to serve as a long-term sort of initiative to promote Iranian culture around the world, starting with art and potentially expanding into other fields. And at the same time, we wanted to make it accessible. So this virtual museum can be accessed on your mobile phone, on your tablet, your iPad, your desktop. You need as low as a 3G connection. You need like low broadband if you're not on the wireless network. So really anybody who has access to the internet can get on this site. So again, to the purpose of the museum. The purpose is really to give Iranian artists primarily a voice to the rest of the world. We're lucky that we're in the UAE today, where you have a government and a country that really supports their artists, supports their ecosystem. Unfortunately, through a combination of reasons, in Iran it's not as, we don't have the same level of state support, so it really falls to the private sector, to people, to individuals, to foundations, to gallerists to promote their own culture. And I consider myself one of those people that are very proud of our Iranian identity and want to promote this beautiful artwork that's coming from our country and give them a global platform. And this is one of the main reasons behind creating this. And as you can see, as you look through this, these works are displayed, in a very unusual way. Like some of them have made much larger, but always in proportion to the original work. So the idea is to always keep the integrity of the artwork without distorting it, but fitting it into a space where, the art dictates the architecture, rather than, for example, if you have a museum built by Jean Nouvel, there's no person more talented on the planet than him, but at the end of the day, you're fitting the artworks into his museum. This is, the artworks are dictating the stature, the way the works are displayed, so it's something different. Again, we approached it using like multitude of people involved. So we started the project with Amina and actually Hormoz, who were both in the audience. And Amina has remained through the project, and really I consider her the project manager with her great company, Open Crate. Not to give it an endorsement, but they're a fantastic company if you ever need any help in the art world, so thank you, Amina, for everything you've done. And Hormoz, who's always been a very instrumental advisor and a strong advocate for the Iranian art scene, and all his partners at Dastan. You know, as I said, this initiative is really about bringing in people who have a sympathy and an interest in promoting Iranian art, but also over time bringing it to be in dialogue with the rest of the world, because this bridge is very important. And we already know in a world where political divisions are so wide that it's unlikely to see those bridges, you know, met easily. But in the world of culture, we can have very different views politically, but both share an aesthetic interest in a particular work. And again, this is a different way to exhibit these works. So this museum allows you to be, well, let me go back a step. This museum is called the Triple I. You know, again, my idea is just to start this thing, fund it, get it off the ground, and commit to it so that it's sustainable for at least the next 10 years without any potential revenue. And frankly, until I'm gone, I hope I can continue it. And I didn't want to have an identity that's linked to me. I might be the founder, but it's a vision, but it's called the Triple I. Why the Triple I? Because one, you know, it's meant to bring an illusion of immersiveness, interactiveness, intelligence. And you're going to see this as we go through the presentation. But also, I don't want it to be about Mohammed Afkhami or the foundation. I want it to be about Iranian art. And the idea of calling it the Triple I also is more catchy than having some long-winded Iranian names associated to it. So when you promote it socially, it should be able to pick up. And then, of course, I say maybe it should be called the Quadruple I, because the fourth I being Iran. But I let it be a bit evasive and let people assume the Triple I means immersive, interactive, Iranian, intelligent, whatever it may be. But it's meant to be something that promotes Iranian art and allows it to have a dialogue over time. Now, the first phase is really bringing the collection, you know, our collection online. But over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be doing more group shows, more curation, more initiatives with other collections so that it becomes truly, you know, global. So you can see from these images that you're doing things that you couldn't do in a real museum. For example, you can't display an artwork with water underneath it the way it is. You can't have these proportions because, again, the actual artwork might be 2 meters by 3 meters, but in this display it might be 10 meters by 6.5 meters. So again, when we started the project, we said, well, how are we going to go about this? And one thought was, let's hire an architectural firm. And it dawned on me that we have fantastic talents coming out of Iran. And one group, ASA North, founded by Ahmed Reza Streaker, who just recently won the Aga Khan Architecture Prize. I came to him, I said, let's design a museum in the virtual world. And he approached it in a very novel way. He said, let's create something that doesn't have plumbing, that doesn't have gravity, that it can only exist in an online world. Let's have interiors where the works dictate how the museum evolves, so that the walls react with the works, so that you react with the walls, things that you cannot do in the real world. Of course, again, I never think it's a substitute, but I think it's another way to enjoy art and take advantage of the fact that we have this virtual possibility that continues to improve. So this is a sort of rendering of what the museum would look like if it were real. And you can start seeing how some of the works are set in context. This is a work by Ali Bani Saj. We haven't landed on Earth yet. This is a work where Ali talks about a phrase that was made when Willem de Kooning was interviewed in the 60s, saying, how do you feel about man going to the moon? And he's like, why are we going to the moon when we have so many problems on Earth? And so the reason why I show that work and I show the way these works are displayed is that, you know, you're experiencing these works in a way you couldn't experience them in the museum. There'll be an AI voice or a person that we can bring to read over the description of these works. So if you like your work, you click on it, and it comes up, and then you see the history of that work, where it is, what the story of the artist is, what the intention is. So this is some of the things that you're doing that, again, makes it more unusual than just, let's say, watching an online show of a British Museum show that's been rendered online. Once we hired the architectural firm and they started designing their plan for an online museum, we really need to think about how to execute this and who are the right people to bring to help create the actual content. And we had a few iterations. Amina knows we had a few broken marriages, but we finally got to a great group in New York and LA called Lily Studios. And they did a fantastic job, and I hope after we go through the whole presentation, you'll agree that they, I think, delivered on point, given the technology, given the mandate, given the fact you can access it from your mobile phone. And they really set about working with the architect. Then we had to think about a curator, and I'd had a very positive experience with Dr. Ferry Daftari, who is an ex-MoMA curator and also from a prominent Iranian family and very knowledgeable in Iranian art. And I had her select a bunch of works. And again, everyone had autonomy. Once we made the decision of recruiting certain people for the project, I didn't get involved. I let people just tussle it out. And if it was really going in a direction I didn't like, I might intervene, but that never happened, thankfully. And I'm very, very pleased with the result. And again, you guys will be the judge, not me, but I'm happy. So this is an interesting section. The main room or main section of the museum is a sphere. And one of the themes, we're going to have about 18 rooms to start with when we launch the museum. Probably 10 in the first phase and another 8 launched a few months later. And this particular sphere is interesting, and you'll see it in more detail, is divided into male and female section. And I think very relevant because obviously, what we see in Iran today is very sad, very tragic. But interestingly, one anecdote that people don't talk about is the importance of Iranian artists within the Iranian artistic community. When you think about Western artists, especially in the modern and contemporary context, about 18% of all artists in the Western world are women, the rest are men. In Iran, that percentage is closer to 40. So despite the fact that we have our, terrible societal issues and there's this horrible situation going on in Iran now where, women are really fighting for their rights, we've actually been quite representative on the art world. And so this will be reflected as well. And their tribute and their contribution to Iranian art will be continually honored in this museum. Not only through this section, but also many of the sections you've already seen before are full of female artists in their own entirety. So this is, to give you a sense, this is a sculptural installation where it's a neon, and it's a barrel this big with a neon tulip symbol, which is, as you know, the center of the Iranian flag. And this work, just to give you a perfect example of how you can make it incredible in the online world, in the real world, it's 7 of these barrels with these neon lights spinning. In our virtual museum, we've blown them up in a way where, you can see you're just having a fun time going through it and seeing how beautiful they are, and actually very, very poignant because obviously, there are many interpretations of this work, but this could be seen as like all the martyrs, for example, that died in their Iran-Iraq war, but honored in a way and displayed in a way which you could never redo in the real world because you wouldn't have enough of these actual artworks in existence. One of our greatest artists is Parviz Tanavoli. And so we have a room honoring him and his legacy. As he enters into his 80s, obviously he's produced many works, but arguably his most iconic is the Heech. We don't need to go into what the Heech is, at least not for today's talk, because that's too specific. But what I will say is, here you're seeing his works displayed, and then of course we have these robots featured around, and you press on their faces, and you suddenly see these links that go to interviews, critics, documentaries about him. So beyond this aesthetic project, it's also meant to be an academic one, where if you have an interest in this space, you can go on this site and just go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Because every work will have a accompanying, story. If the artist is well cataloged, there'll be even more references. So its idea is that over time it becomes a portal where Iranian art is introduced to the world, and the world of, let's say, non-Iranian art is introduced to Iran. But again, using the incredible technology we have today, that doesn't require you to be in any one place. Again, it allows you to see works up close, and again, of course, in a museum, you could go right up to a work and look at it in detail. But then, if, let's say, the show's crowded, you're going to be pushed along and you won't have more than a minute or two to look at it. Here, you can have the luxury of sitting in your living room, eyeing it, looking at detail, reflecting on it, having a lot of research available to you. It'll all be online. So we talked about the architecture. We call it reactive architecture. Why reactive? Because as you can see, as you probe around, you start discovering works sometimes that look like they're in the middle of the desert, but actually, that's the beauty. You can see the architecture come through. Here, this is a room on the history or the curse of oil, curse or blessing we call it, and you see the oil passing through. Again, this is another work which we saw before, but the idea is that the architecture is reacting to the way you browse it. So as you turn your phone or you turn your finger, it's following you, either with sand but it's reacting to your movements. You're dictating the way you navigate through this experience. Of course, these are all videos that have been prepared so that, I don't make you sit there and scroll your phone right now, but I will give you that opportunity towards the end of the talk. So again, this gives you more visuals of how you're going to be able to display the work. There'll be like a little icon with a flashing white light in the corner that will allow you to go into certain rooms. So you don't have to follow a set path like you do in a real museum. You can pick what you like. So if you see a work that catches your interest, you can immediately go towards it. And again, you can see the scale. That sculpture you see in the middle, that's actually a 1 meter by 1.8 meter sculpture, but in the rendering it's made like 20 meters big. But always keeping the proportion, but taking advantage of the fact that you can be fun and be creative in the online world. So I'm going to invite you now to come and just take your phones, if you use your QR codes, and just zap into that. I'm going to get out of the way if I'm in the way for anybody. And then type in the password, capital A, capital D, @22 exclamation mark. So this will be the first time we open up this site to anybody. So it's a good thing for you guys to just play around. We had some issues. We saw that people with Android phones have a more smooth experience, but some of the people with Apples work well as well. But it's good for you to just play around with it and go in on the site and just see how it looks on your phones. Are we getting online? There's probably a stronger Wi-Fi connection in here, but if you're getting online and it's working for your phones, it should be fine. The idea is, I want to stress test it with you guys. I don't need extra Wi-Fi boosting. So how many are online right now? All right, still not enough. We're getting there. So I thought what I'd also do is while you're browsing, I'd open it up to questions, whatever thoughts that you may have. And again, I'm very grateful to the team consisting of Amina and Nora at OpenCrate, to Dr. Ferry Daftari, who curated the initial selection, to Lily Studios for making the whole thing happen, and also to ASA North for coming up with the architectural plan. So I'm here to answer questions, any thoughts you may have. The idea is really just to let you experience it rather than me tell you more about it. Go ahead.
First of all, I had the pleasure of having a preview with you a couple of weeks ago, and I was blown away, and having seen it today, I'm speechless. I love it. I think it's an amazing initiative, so thank you for sharing it with us. You mentioned that as these things grows, you are also looking forward perhaps to show other exhibitions, not necessarily your works. Is it still going to be, when it comes to other exhibition, focused exclusively on Iranian art, or potentially thinking also about, I don't know, Middle Eastern in general or other arts?
Thank you, Serena, for the question. So the idea is absolutely to integrate it with non-Iranian art, but always trying to find a way to build bridges. So I think over the next, every 6 months, we plan to have a new show. And of course, if the reception is good, then we'll program it like a museum. We'll probably have a show every 3 months. The beauty is that we now have the technical team. We have the ambition. I mean, if you think about museums, like if I want to have this to be a real global success, I have to make sure that we have integration with other art worlds. So the answer is absolutely over time. And we'll be inviting other curators from all over the world to select works. They can use our collection. If they don't like our collection, use someone else's. I have no problem. My issue is I just want to make sure that there's a platform where Iranian art is remaining vibrant. And of course, there's another reason why we're excited about this initiative. If you think about the footfall of the largest museums in the world, take the Louvre, take the Met, take the British Museum, 3 of the most trafficked institutions in the world. Pre-COVID, they were achieving numbers between 6.5 and 8 million people a year. We hope that within a year, we'll have at least 2 million visitors, which would put us in the top 20 museums in the world, without having to build a huge structure, without having all the politics around it. It could be something amazing, because today, think about the connectivity, think about social media. Of course, social media has its good and its bad, but the good thing about it is that it's widely accessible and people have an interest. So even when we created this initial phase, if you scan and go through it, a lot of the experiences are instant. And the reason is that the online audience doesn't have the same patience as the physical audience that actually makes the effort. Once you make the effort to go to the museum, you're going to spend at least an hour there. But if you're in your living room and you're like, I just saw my CNN profile pop up, I'm just going to flip over, suddenly you just dump my experience. So I have to make sure that whatever we show is very compelling. But the idea is absolutely to expand it to a global audience by also appealing to art that appeals to other nationalities, other countries, other regions.
So you will do like vernissage opening that will be online to contact everybody that there's a new exhibition to see?
Yes. So the way we would do it is we would have over time, as you access the site, we ask you to share like an email. So we will develop a database of people that we can send out to. And of course, we're engaging now with certain social media and conventional PR firms to get the message out there. Obviously, when we launch these shows, ahead of those shows being launched, we want as many people to be aware of it.
May I ask a question?
Yes?
You obviously have one of the most significant collections of Iranian art globally, and the Abu Dhabi Art Fair is fortunate to have a work on loan from you for the Farida Lashai exhibition here. And I think there's a wonderful synergy between what you reveal online in your museum and what you generously loan out for exhibitions. What do you see as that relationship between the content that you curate online and what you'll enable from your collection to be shown also in material form, in real form?
Thanks, Diala, for the good question. So, as you know, when we started this foundation over 5 years ago, the idea was to continually lend these works either in their entirety or even for certain group shows like the one you have here. And so that bricks approach of lending will continue regardless. And then the idea is to complement it with this online experience. As you said before, like one work that you can see in real, but also see online is, let me bring it up to give you an example. In the show that Art Abu Dhabi is organized with the Lashay Foundation, you have this work, which is in display in the online world, but also, let me just bring it up, sorry. 1 second. But the idea, Diala, is that we'll be doing both because it's important to have everything available. We're agnostic. If it's online or in the real world, we want both. And that's very important for the collection. I'm trying to bring up the work, I apologize. There, that work on the right, this one. This is a work from the collection that you can see in the real as you enter Art Abu Dhabi. And so there's going to be many instances where you're going to be able to visit the work online as well as in the real world. But as you know, real world takes time. You're not really in control in the sense that, again, you have to rely on institutions to have openings. And if you work with institutions, you know that they have 2-3 year forward calendars. So it's not easy, but we'll continue to be cooperative as we are always. And again, this is a holistic effort, online, bricks and clicks, the whole thing.
Hi. Sorry, over here, yes. My question is, it was partly answered. By the way, thank you for the talk, really inspiring. I myself, as an artist, I would always recommend the tangible thing, which is the physical form. At the same time, the world is changing, so potentially in the future there would be more digital platforms. My question is, with the artists that you represent in terms of the physical art or the digital online, what is the majority of artists do they tend to go towards? Would it be the physical or the digital one? And at the same time, is there marketing strategies that you're using to implement to attract artists to apply for the digital?
That's a good question, and it's probably a lecture in itself. I think the cautious approach is if you're an artist and you're making physical works, you can't just abandon that. I mean, that's your core, that's who you are. But I think what does make sense to me is I've seen some of the more clever middle-aged artists who are not technologically savvy but trying to keep up with the times. They're making physical works and then accompanying it with an attached NFT. Maybe that's the solution. But, sorry. No, but I'm just saying, I think having works that also cater to a digital audience, because you think about a certain generation set, they're equally happy to have their artwork in their wallet, like in their phone, while I'm somebody who likes to see it, on my wall. But I'm also open-minded enough to realize that there's a whole generation with a different taste, and if you're not with them, then you're sort of out of it. So I think, you have to balance your creativity with also what people want. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the 70s, there were a lot of very talented calligraphers in Iran who made incredible works with, just so impressive, their strength of their hand and their quality of calligraphy. But guess what? Calligraphy was on the down, modern, more abstract creation was on the up. And so at the end of the day, these are artists that also have to live. They can't just make work and then, not sell them. They have to find a way to see their works in people's homes or in collections. And so they adapted with the times and started. That's the digital world. Maybe that means over, who knows? This would never happen in the virtual world, would it? Right? You know, I mean, let's be honest. Like in the virtual world, you'd be sitting, kicking back, and nothing would be going on. If there was a fire in your house, you just take your phone outside and you sit in the lobby, you know, and you still be watching it. So another advantage of the virtual museum. But to my friend, the artist, who asked the question, you know, it's important that as an artist you also adapt with the times. And so I would encourage you to make medium that still keep the integrity and honesty of what you do, but just be agnostic when it comes to medium. And I think digital art has a great future. I mean, you know, people were making fun of video art years ago, and look at it now. People are making fun of neon lights now, like Dan Flavin is like revered. I mean, my point is, art is so subjective that, you know, it's appealing to one person, not appealing to another. But I think the virtual technology breakthroughs we have are just adding to the palette for artist choices. So I think it's a good thing. Mic. Right there in the front. There. There. Okay, after.
Thank you, Mohammed. I see how you work for this project, and all the friends and community for the arts. I thank you for this beautiful work, because it's really important to do this mix about reality and technology. And it's tremendous professional, I think. And I don't have too much question, but you tell me a lot about this project, and I know. But only one question maybe for the other people. When you see the piece of art in the museum, you can go and you can click in the piece of art and you have all the information, for example, about the artist, technique, year, authors, exhibition. Exists all this information in the virtual museum? Okay.
So all the works that you see, at least the works that are on display, they'll have obviously a description, the medium, all the history about the work, but even beyond that, a biography on the actual work. So we've also brought in some researchers from the Courthold Institute who've done a biography on every work that we intend to display. So it's not just, oh, this is a work, this is the artist, that's it, made this year, this is the medium. There's an attempt to describe what you're seeing so that, you know, I mean, I know about Iranian art because I'm avid and passionate about it, but to an audience, let's say, I don't know, I've got a friend in Angola who wants to check out what's going on in Iranian art. How's he going to know what's going on in this work? He sees this barrel of oil. He's like, okay, it's a colorful barrel. What's going on there? And then he clicks on it, and then there's a description. He can either read it, or if he's really lazy, he can just listen, and there's a voice that goes through it. So my point is, it's trying to make it like armchair consumable. And the best part, it costs nothing, just your time. And so for me, you know, there's no excuse not to visit it. Like, I'm making it as easy as possible within the limitations that exist. And so hopefully that answers your question.
So I appreciate that the fact that this museum allows for a unique experience and a personal experience and an educational one. And I'm just wondering whether you want to say something about the fact that it will, how does it affect the role of museum as a civic space, as a public space? And yes, that's basically it. Yeah, we'll be saved from the alarms and the fire alarms and the interruptions, but Yeah.
So that's a great question. And I think the way I would perceive it is by having this ability, this possibility that's not in a museum, it actually increases a universe of art lovers, people interested in art. I think it's complementary, and I don't think it's a zero-sum game. It doesn't detract from going to the museum. I think, if anything, somebody who's like lukewarm about going to a museum might browse this and then encourage them to go into the museum. So I think it's actually complementary. I think it creates additional audience, not subtractive, but additional. And I think this is going to be a very strong avenue in the future. I mean, I'll tell you a conversation I had where the CEO of one of the largest American banks, I happened to have having dinner with him, and he said, "What are you up to outside of work?" And I said, "I'm working on this project." And he thinks it's so interesting that he'd like to sort of get involved with what I'm doing and try to replicate it so that he can go to some of these very large investors in his bank who have either large corporate collections, large private collections, and sort of use it as a soft way to get more business out of them, of course, but encourage them to show their works in a similar capacity. Because a lot of people are nervous to show their artworks in a private space, or don't want people to know the extent of what they have. But maybe there's a happy medium where people can share these works through an online format and encourage them to sort of share these collections, because how many works are being brought into auctions, into private sales, and then never seen again? And now there's a possibility where they see a collector who in their mind might be like-minded. They say, well, he's doing it, maybe we should do it. So I want this to be an encouraging sign for people who have the means to step up and do their bit. And it would be amazing to see like 50, 100 online museums being created by collections that are not visible to the public to add to the public's experience. I mean, it should be shared. What are you going to do with the art? Put it in your storage? No. You need to have it out there. And of course, you can't have all your art in the real world, because sometimes you don't have the space or the means to put it up. But in the online world, there's no excuse.
Thank you very much for your beautiful talk. It's very inspiring. My question is, each museum has some art educational programs. I wonder if there is a specific art education program in your ideas.
That's a great question. And I will tell you that if we had a manifesto when we created this virtual museum, number one was for it to be an academic archive of modern and contemporary Iranian art. And so, whilst it's not a formal program, the way we're making data on these works that are being displayed available with, an appropriate amount of sub-information. For example, that room I showed you with Parviz Tanavoli, you have links to documentaries, links to publications, links to book houses that sell his works. We have no benefit. We're just streamlining it. That's one way in which we're going to be doing that. But in terms of a formal educational program, it's on the cards, but not yet not fully realized at this point. It's still early for us, but just going through this museum, and you can't do it right now because, as I said, this is pre-recorded, but when you go through it and you click on a work, you'll see a lot more data than you would about that work, about that artist, and you find in the museum. Because the museum has a label, and that's it, and a catalog if you want to buy it at the entrance or on the exit. This will have a lot more.
That's fantastic. What I would like to add a little thing to your suggestions. What if a condensed academic global program is added to your museum, which can define all kinds of arts, and which can be used from all groups, age groups, from elementary school to high school to higher education, and even train trainers internationally, and the whole system with a molecular structure like Lego pieces that can be easily taught and that can easily explain visually all kinds of arts. If you are interested, I'm more than happy to discuss it with you.
No, very interested, and ultimately that's what we would like to be. I mean, this is meant to be, over time, a forum for art. And okay, it starts on this Iranian journey, but it's just, you know, we have a very loose criteria. If there's even a dotted line that comes back to Iran and your idea has one Iranian artist out of 50 in your talk or your narrative, it's qualified. So we'd be happy to have that discussion.
Great, thank you.